Okay. Welcome, everybody. I'm David Ulin, former book editor of the Los Angeles Times and also a contributor to Alta Journal. And I am here to talk with Anita Felicelli, who is the books editor of Alta Journal, which is a regional publication, California and the West, published out of San Francisco online and in print. Anita, thank you for being with us. I appreciate your time.
No, thank you for having me to talk to you.
And we're going to talk a little bit about how, as assigning editors, both of us, Anita is currently an assigning editor, and I've worked as an assigning editor. We're going to talk a little bit about how we choose books, particularly in regard to a publication that has a geographic focus of some sort. So, Anita, let's start with that question. When you're, first of all, when you're mapping out a schedule, how far in advance are you thinking, are you looking? How far in advance are you mapping out your assignments?
Ideally about 3 months, but lately, because Alta only runs one review per week, it has been getting out to about 4 months in
Okay.
advance.
And how do you, I mean, I know there's not a hard and fast or, sort of cut and dry way of thinking about this question, but what are the kinds of criteria that are in your head when you're looking for books to assign or thinking about what you might want to cover or to assign?
My first thought is, you know, whether an author is from the West or is writing about the West in some way that's interesting and relevant to the present moment. So for me, I go through the catalogs, and my very first step is to just find the books that where it's specified that the author is from California or the West, and also to look for titles that might deal with the West, like something like a history of Deadwood might still qualify, even though it's not, even though the author is not from California or the West.
Right. So it's either California or Western writers that you're looking
Right.
for, or it's California or Western themes or Western subjects that you're looking for.
Correct.
And in terms of pairing, I mean, I know that you have a group of reviewers that you're working with, so and that are bringing stuff to you, bringing ideas to you as well as. I mean, it's a two-way street. You're generating some ideas and going to those writers, but you're also, they're suggesting books that they may want to be writing about. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about the kind of dynamic or the relationship between the editor and the writer, and how that gets constructed or how that gets developed.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was lucky to inherit a whole bunch of writers from you from your assignments, and so I try to cultivate those relationships by looking at what they've written in the past and seeing what's interested them. You know, if they wrote a really negative review about something, I'm less likely to assign that a similar type of book to them in the future. But I just getting a sense of their taste by reading their work is sort of my first thought or first step. And similarly, if somebody pitches me that I don't know, it's reviewing their old reviews to see, are they a writer that takes other writers' work really seriously, or are they snarky? Those kinds of things factor into whether I want to work with them.
Right. So so it has to there is so this raises that really interesting question to me of like the sensibility of the section. I mean, you as an editor are it's not just a random array of books that you're putting up there. You're really thinking about what the point of view of the section is, how one week's review might be in conversation with the next week's review, and how it becomes a kind of larger ongoing relationship with the reader.
Right. I think getting a little bit of a rhythm and also enough variety, each month, trying to find a fiction title, trying to find a poetry title, trying to find a nonfiction title, just sort of like trying to make sure there's that balance and that there's also sort of a balance in viewpoints, um, or what I think to be the viewpoint based on, a quick look at the book. So.
I mean, one of the things that I've always found valuable about working with freelancers is that, they often will suggest a book that I might have missed, that I might have overlooked or just didn't know about. And so it feels to me that they're almost like a safety valve or a fail-safe valve in the sense of keeping the conversation dynamic, but also opening my mind up to titles that I might not be aware of.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And especially in genres that I'm less familiar with, this becomes very useful, or that I like am less assiduous about combing for. Like, I'm not quite as on top of what's happening in the mystery world, but luckily that, you know, there are reviewers that are quite on top of that and can suggest titles that are really useful.
Right. And so I guess the last question I want to talk about, just in terms of this framing, is that notion of, I mean, how much are you thinking about the reader of the review, or the potential reader of the book when you are assigning, or you are also a reviewer when you're writing a review? How, I mean, how much of, I guess, how much of a sense of responsibility to the reader do you feel, in terms of assigning an array and a variety of titles over, or choosing a variety of titles over a period of time, and also in terms of, you know, the way that you're approaching editing and putting those pieces out?
Hmm. I mean, I feel definitely that I want to appeal to a reader that cares about books, that cares about an array of books from very serious literature um, to more popular or I don't know if I should say mainstream, but titles that tend to appeal more to a mass market. But I also want, you know, for there to be an openness in the reader. So I think about an ideal reader for the section as being somebody who really enjoys a dynamic you know, conversation about literature. And then you know, there's going to be some, when I'm assigning, I'm thinking about that, but then I'm also sort of keeping an eye out for, you know, which I lost my train of thought there. I'm also just keeping an eye out for which books would be, you know, most interesting in that regard. Like, I think if there's an experimental poetry title, I want to be the kind of magazine where we will cover that if it's of interest. Of course, there's some like little bit of dynamic there in terms of, I don't know in advance whether a reviewer will really like a book or not, or that they will be the right person. So there's a little bit of a gambling uh, going on there.
Yeah, no, I think it's always a gamble, or, you know, a crapshoot in a certain way. You assign a book and then you get the review back that you get. I mean, without asking you to kind of go, yeah, speak out of school, is that, you know, that for me was, I wouldn't say a danger of of assigning, but it was always something where I realized I was selecting the books and making the assignment. But at the same time, once the book goes to the reviewer is going to write the review that they're going to write. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that experience, getting back reviews, editing, I guess, editing a review, to bring out the best in the writer, you know, even if you don't completely agree with, I mean, I remember, I won't say which, but I once assigned a book when I was at the Times, to a writer. I read the book. I didn't think much of the book. The reviewer also didn't think much of the book, but didn't think much of the book for other reasons than I didn't think much of the book. And then I found myself having to edit a review that I agreed with, but for different reasons, and it became a complicated edit. But it was really important for me to stay out of the way of the reviewer's assessment of the book.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I have also encountered that a few times, usually with negative reviews that I don't necessarily think are quite fair.
Right.
But at the same time, I have to allow for the other viewpoint, right? So I sort of disengage myself a bit from um, making that assessment, but I try to like look very carefully at the text to see if the way it's being reasoned is a fair way of being reasoned, if that makes sense.
No,
Just
that totally makes sense. I think that's, yeah, I always I want to see, I want to see evidence for the argument, and I want to think, especially in a negative review, I want to make sure that the argument is not pejorative or ad hominem or something like that. I think it's important for outlets to publish both positive and negative reviews, but I don't want the negative reviews to have some kind of agenda or an axe to grind.
right. And I think that's where it gets to be a little tricky because if you've actually read the book, then you have like other evidence potentially in mind.
Right.
But I think some of the fun of editing is also in even though it's a little bit painful with certain titles, because if you really like a title and you think the reviewer is not being totally fair, it's a little unsettling. But at the same time, you get into the viewpoint where you think about it almost like as a lawyer of just like, oh, how do I make this argument stronger, even though um, I don't ultimately agree with that assessment, you know, so that's an interesting puzzle.
It is. And I just want to say my apologies. I'm talking to you from New York, which is proving its reputation as the noisiest city in the world while we're
Hmm.
talking. So all this background noise, I hope is not getting in the way. Anyway, I think that's what I wanted to ask you. Is there anything else about picking books or, you know, that sort of position of choosing what to assign that you want to bring up or you want to discuss?
I don't think so. I think the one last thing I would say is that one of the special things about a regional publication is being able to sort of navigate that balance um, between the readership and the work and the writer who is reviewing the work, who's looking at the work. And I think that that's maybe a little different for a regional or a local publication versus for um, a nationwide publication, a publication that focuses on books from all over.
And you think, can you talk a little bit more, just to elaborate why you think what you think those differences are, or why you think there's a difference there? I agree with you. I think it's a different set of responsibilities.
Yeah, because I think there's a sense in which you're sort of shaping a conversation that's particular to a place for that versus thinking about, you know, sort of a more abstract, completely abstract reader.
Right.
And so there's more interest in your familiarity with the location that the publication is being marketed primarily to is going to play a greater role in like the aesthetics of the section.
That's a great point, and I think that's a really good place for us to end the conversation. Anita Felicelli, books editor of Alta Journal. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Oh, thank you so much, David.